Welcome to Hire, Lead, and Chill.
All right, Tuesday, 4 p.m. We are on time. That doesn't happen all that often, but I've got really cool guests on today. We're going to talk to them in just a minute. I think this Friday, just to give a heads up to everybody out there for Hire, Lead, Chill, this Friday, the 7th, we're going to get an unemployment report and figure out what's going on in the job market a little bit. We started to get away from that 3.5% stuff, 3.4. We were, I think, back in January, which was like we haven't seen that type of unemployment level since like literally man was on moon. It was like in 1969. So that was a long time ago. And for you conspiracy freaks out there, whatever you want to say about the moon, I know the unemployment rate was 3.4% back then. All right. So with that said, too, we're creeping up. We're, I think, in not May, but whatever the month is before that. Somebody will tell me, but
April.
Before May, yeah, that one, that month was at 3.9%. So we're inching up towards 4%. And as I always say, once we get around that 4%, I think we're going to start to see easier application flow, more application flow coming in, so that ease of maybe being a little bit better at getting applications in, looking at resumes and so on, is no longer a problem as it was the last several years. But then the problem becomes, how do I get through all those resumes and all those applications if we don't have automations and workflows and things like that, which that's what we're here to help you with. So I'll have my calendar link as always somewhere around here. Anyway, that's the boring stuff. Let's get into the cool stuff. I've got Nick and Marnie with me. I'm going to have one of you introduce yourself, and then the other introduce yourself. Whether you want to introduce the other is up to you, but one at a time.
Go ahead, Marnie. You go first.
Okay. Well, I'm going to introduce Nick. How's that?
Nice. I like it.
Yeah.
Curveball.
Yeah. So first, if you haven't seen the show Ted Lasso, we are the co-authors of the book Lead It Like Lasso. And if you have seen the show, Nick is a combo platter of a Trent Krim. He's a great questioner, great listener, like Coach Beard. He's insightful. And a little Roy Kent, great integrity and stick-to-itness. So that is some of his personality. He started out as a coder in New York City, and quickly got promoted to leadership positions. And we talk a good bit on our podcast about, where we've fallen down in leadership and where we've picked things up. And Nick talks about his path along that way. But he landed at an ed tech company as VP of technology and support. And I landed in the customer success side of the house. And so that is how the two of us met. He wasn't sure what that was like when I was going to join the company, because I'd been a fierce advocate as a client of that company. But clearly it all worked out, because here we are. And I'm going to let him start wherever he wants to start, and then pick up and say how we landed from me joining the company he worked for to writing a book together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was very kind. So this is Marnie Stockman. Marnie is... she's a former educator. She started out teaching and kind of worked within different roles within the school district. At some point, like she said, she made that switch into corporate America and started heading up a customer success organization at the same company that I had worked for. And together, we worked for a company that just got acquired and acquired and acquired.
One more time. That's not exaggerating.
And acquired. And we were continually asked to do more with less. And at some point, we had said, and we had built a kind of a business framework that really resulted in a lot of success. So at some point, we said, "Hey, let's start our own company," and we did that. We did exactly that, not with a product, but instead with a framework, a leadership framework, a business operating framework. And Marnie and I were two of the four co-founders. She ultimately became CEO. So I don't know many people in this world that have started out as an educator, a teacher, a math teacher, gone through the different ranks of the school system, and ended up becoming a CEO of a software company. And a very successful software company. We In 3 years, we started a business in a market we did not know from scratch with completely bootstrapped. We funded it ourselves, and 3 years later, we sold it and exited a multi-million-dollar business. And with that in mind, that's why we're here. We ended up getting a lot of questions exactly how we did that, and we believe so much in our framework, our leadership framework, that we wrote a book because we got sick of answering the questions. And
Nice.
but really,
that wraps up all my questions. You guys out there have a good day. No.
So that was long. So that's why we're here.
Perfect. So just to give you guys out there in the audience a backdrop a little bit, I subscribe and Marnie and Nick subscribe to a thing that matches people to be guests on podcasts and vice versa. And so I do a lot of due diligence, and I really want to make sure that I know who's coming on the show. And it's not just, everybody's a coach and everybody's a life coach and everybody's a marketing agency and all that. Some real good ones on both ends of that spectrum. But we had a really good conversation, just super down to earth, but smart people that have a lot of good things that are different and not just your typical stuff. And we always love to talk about leadership and culture and how to retain employees and hire lead show, obviously. So there was a good match. So I think you guys will get a lot of good stuff out of this. I'm also going to make sure that you understand how to get their book, because I got the book, went through some things, and it's definitely something you're going to want to get a hold of. It's different. It's fun. It's let me start a little bit about the book. On tell me who did the foreword, and then just, if you could, just give me the word that's used the most maybe in there, and then we can go from there.
Well, I'm going to have Nick say that, because I don't cuss. So we had imaginary Roy Kent. I mean, of course, we would love to get the real Roy Kent to write the foreword, but we thought, if you were to write the foreword, what would it sound like? So it was definitely an entertaining call where we went through, and it starts. Nick, do you want to say it or not want to say it?
We dropped the F-bomb quite a bit, Shawn. We dropped the F-bomb quite a bit. Yeah. In the spirit of Roy Kent, we do that.
I love it. So let me unpack a few of the things that you guys talked about. And obviously, if you haven't seen the series or the movie, you can get a lot from the book. But I've seen the movie, but I haven't seen the series. So I think it's just really a good way to go about that. How did that idea come around, and how did you tiptoe through getting in trouble for using it?
Nick, you want to talk about how you came to Ted Lasso, and then I can talk about how we tiptoed around it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality of it is, I was watching the television series, and I'm watching it, and at some point, Ted Lasso says, really what my mission is to help everybody become the best versions of themselves. And the day I met Marnie, and her educator background, that was her real core value, right? So it was kind of along those lines that at first I said, you need to watch the show, because this Ted Lasso character is you, Marnie Stockman. But beyond that, the show itself, for those in the audience that aren't familiar with the show, a lot of people think it's about soccer. In reality, it has a backdrop of a soccer club, but it's about relationships. It's about personal growth. It's about the power of positivity. And really it aligned to, you talked about culture, Shawn, a lot, when you're talking about hiring and looking at individuals, we lead with culture. We firmly believe that culture is a critical element, not only in hiring people, but in running a business and running our daily lives. So that's kind of where that started. I'll leave it to Marnie to tell us why we wrote the book, and tied it to Ted Lasso.
So the thing about the show, and if you're on Facebook, there are so many Ted Lasso communities that people just love the way it made them feel, right? So it's very relatable. like Nick said, it's not really a soccer show. You leave that show wanting to be better. You want to lead like Ted. People ask all the time, like, what are some strategies I can use to lead like Ted Lasso? You know, people are doing their sales trainings on Ted Lasso, et cetera. So as folks were asking us about our successes, and like Nick said, our core values were very much aligned to Ted Lasso. We thought, you know what? It's very relatable. People get what Ted Lasso's like, and we want them to have the same feel when we write the book. So let's make it obvious that that's how we want them to find the book. So we titled it Lead It Like Lasso and put a mustache on there. So your other question, though, was how do we, you know, what are the copyright pieces on that?
Yeah.
So we talked to an intellectual property lawyer. We talked to two, and there are 4 basic rules based on the legislation around Tao of Pooh. So, you know, you can say anything you want about a human being because they can defend themselves, but you can't say anything you want about a creative piece because it's someone else's intellectual property. So you can't act like they wrote it. We've got, you know, unofficial, unauthorized, and uncensored on it. You can't act like you were part of the original, whatever that was. You can't use an actual image without their permission, right? So we didn't use any image from their book. And then there's always one, and I always forget one of the 4 things.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can't just rewrite their book. You have their story. You have to bring something new to it. And we really parallel our story and our framework with lessons of Ted Lasso, but also with other leadership books, et cetera. So we passed, we hit the 4 check marks.
Awesome. Let's start with leadership. And then we'll talk a little bit more about culture and that type of thing. I've being that I'm with the Hire Lead Chill, and we help home service businesses throughout the country find good people for them to hire. In general, that's what we do. So a lot of the things that we do for that type of industry, which is our heart and soul, that's what we love, is cleaning industry and home service industry and all that, is that we want to also do some training and a little bit of consulting. We do this free for our clients, is talk about leadership and culture and so on. Those are things that help us retain the client. Your job ad is sort of like an advertisement that you would use for marketing for a prospective client. We just have on the recruiting spectrum somebody we call a candidate and an employee, and you do the same things. This is what we're supposed to do, but we're really focused on employee leadership, I call it, an employee culture, an employee focused vision. So everything I try to do, I put in the realm of the employee, and because I think that helps leaders and owners of companies look through the lens of their employees a little bit and sort of get a perception of what they feel, what they're seeing, what they're tasting, what they're hearing, and what they're experiencing, and all those sort of things. So what is it that you guys talk about, or maybe it's in the book, about how do you assess your leadership abilities? How do you take a look and figure out, where you stand as a leader, and then what you need to improve on?
Well, there are a lot of leadership assessments in the world, right? There's the Myers-Briggs, there's, Strength Finders, et cetera. And we put one in the book so you can find out what Ted Lasso character you would lead to be. So there's certainly that path of strengths and weaknesses with specific skills. But one thing that is different about the way we talk about it is we focus first on core value. And we really have an activity where folks will define their core values, because so many times, and I suspect you see this all of the time in the world of recruiting, if there's a clash at work, it is typically because something you are doing is not aligned to the core values and culture of the company, right? And culture is how your core values play out. So if you are all about accountability and at work it is just willy-nilly, whatever happens, that doesn't feel good. And there's that clash that you feel. So we find determining core values of yourself and everybody that works in your company and being clear about how that plays out is really important.
Nice.
I think the other thing just that's important to point out just about the book, Shawn, is this isn't a traditional leadership book like Good to Great, there's so many on the market,
Right,
right? This is written from the standpoint that we believe everybody is a leader. So this is more of a personal leadership book, although all the strategies, in our opinion, scale up, and you can leverage them as a leader of a team or an organization or what have you. But our big thing is that, whether you're in a classroom, a boardroom, a locker room, a dining room, everybody's a leader, and everybody should work hard to understand what drives them through the core values. And then we have this whole notion of, then we follow from there, right? How to set a vision, how to establish SMART goals. But again, we frame it both from a personal perspective, right? But also from an organizational perspective. But at the heart, we want to speak to people who just want to make themselves better, to level up and truly become the best version of themselves.
Beautiful. I agree with you. I think everybody's a leader, and I think everybody can become a better leader. I often talk to business owners daily, and a lot of times when things aren't going well, or we're just trying to figure some things out, I always say, let's start with you. Let's start with us. What are we doing? Look in the mirror. And so I talk an awful lot about ego and perception and things like that, because that's what we're talking about when we're talking about inner self. That's what the ego is. It's this self that's inside of us, that is built in us, whether it's from a higher power or whatever your belief system is. It's part of us that basically is the rawest form is, don't step in front of the bus because it'll run you over. Okay. That's the basic fundamentals of your ego. Over time, we've let that just increase and grow and grow and grow. And it creates fears and worries and things like that I think really cloud our judgment and really cloud our positivity. So I want to talk a little bit about that positivity thing and that, that belief system. I've got a friend that is why he's a friend of mine, I have no idea, because he's a scientist that works at the Cleveland Clinic, and they're using me as a subject matter now. And so, but he's actually from Ireland. He's a really good guy, but he says that and he uses mostly a sports analogy because that's his niche. That's what he focuses in on. So he's dealt with some professional people, professional athletes, and so on. And it's an amazing thing when we talk about, okay, the negative thinking or the positive thinking, right? Those are two different thought paths and different thinking. And he says the positive thinking is really good, really pretty powerful, but it can't hold a candle to the negative thinking. It can't hold a candle to it. So your negative thoughts just absolutely are like on bionic mode, if that's where you're going, more times than not. Where the positive thing is we need that. And it's sort of like an AC-doocy type of thing, right? The yin-yang type of thing. So that's the in his view and his research, the negative things, at least with professional athletes, and I think this would probably go along with most of us in our lives, will absolutely destroy you. Absolutely destroy you if you don't have a handle on it. And I tend to believe that a lot of times people that I talk to, I don't know what to do. I keep having these thoughts. You do have these thoughts. We do have these thoughts, but there are tools, there are things that you can do when they pop in your head, like they do for every human being on the earth that's ever lived and will ever live. Okay. The most positive human being you can think of has negative thoughts, but why are they different? What do you guys unpack that for me and talk about anything you want, or disagree with it, or love to hear your thoughts on it?
Well, a couple things come to mind. First, as an educator, I know I was always told that it takes about 90 positive pieces of feedback to counterbalance one negative. Wow. So if you think about, and I take that to heart anytime I've done a presentation, and at the end of the year, I would always have the students do a survey. So I had maybe 150 students in a year, So if I got more than one criticism, right, it was crushing to the soul because the numbers just didn't work out. So if you think about that, yeah, you're very right. I thought this was very interesting. So two other things came to mind: self-sabotage and imposter syndrome. But I'm actually going to reference. I listened to a 5 minutes of a conversation between Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman the other day. And Hugh Jackman was talking about how Ryan Reynolds speaks openly about his anxiety. And Ryan Reynolds said that people that have anxiety and negative thoughts, it's actually very good for his business because he can iterate on so many possible future outcomes. That is why that's part of his creativity in coming up with creative movies, because he's able to go down so many different paths that he tries to turn that into a strength by running down the different paths and then using sort of Annie Dukes wrote a book called Thinking in Bets. We're like, what's the probability of that bad path actually happening? We need to set that one aside. All right. That's a lot of ramble from me.
Nick, what do you got?
Well, first I was thinking maybe your friend was with me on the golf course today while I was standing over that 3-foot putt, and I was thinking there is no way I'm going to make this putt.
He is a golfer indeed. Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I actually lived through that. I haven't been shy about talking on our podcast that, I suffered from panic attacks in my mid to late 20s. I've suffered from imposter syndrome. Not suffered, I just dealt with it, right?
Yeah.
Where I was just filled constantly with negative thoughts. And, a couple of things with that. I think it bears out in the book a little bit, and I firmly believe it. It's really about, to me, understanding who you are, what drives you, and having a plan. That's what helps me, right? As we talk about having a plan and a vision, kind of act as
guide
bumper
rail
pads in a bowling alley or guide rails. And when I start to think about all these different thoughts about how things may or may not go right, I have the bigger picture, and I say, okay, I'm going to deal with it. If it doesn't go right, it doesn't go right. I'm not saying I'm perfect at that by any stretch of the imagination. And I think it's a genuine struggle. But to me and to us, as we wrote the book, we thought a lot about that in terms of, okay, how do we overcome that? Because Marnie as well has suffered from anxiety and negative thoughts. And to us, the best thing that you could possibly do is, number one, try to be positive. But number two, accept that you are going to get negative thoughts and make sure you have a plan that keeps you, steering in the right direction. So I'm far from a doctor, but that's really what I think about when you start asking those types of questions.
I've been asked on a number of occasions, and mainly it comes into mind with my children, what, sort of what's the secret to life, or what is, how can you have a peace and happiness in your life? What is the success and secret to being peaceful through life? And that's, I think, what a lot of us would just love to have. And you said the word that I say, and you said accept. There's to me, it's acceptance of the world as it is, not on how we think it should be, and the people in it as they are, not how we think they should be. Okay. Yeah. Because then we're dealing outside of reality, and that's a problem sometimes. Not always, if we're dreaming and being imaginative, but if we're trying to find peace and we're trying to be happy and we're struggling with some internal things, I think the word accept is one of the best words I can come up with to change that. And I think that's powerful, to just be accepting of the things that are going on. Not that you necessarily need to like them. I didn't say the word easy anywhere in that, but just accept it, man, And then I think when we talk about getting a plan and having a vision, and we're like, okay, we've got it. It's almost like it's on paper. We've got some of it on the wall we look at, and it's on our fridge and on our mirror and all that, all those things. But then it's like, I think when the rubber meets the road, if that's a saying, I think it's something like that. But when shit hits the fan, or when things are supposed to happen, there's this there's got to be some sort of discipline in there too. Maybe a soft discipline. I don't need to be rigid with it, because we do have to understand that things are going to come off the track sometimes. And again, we have to accept that. But how do you what is the discipline part of that? Because we talk a lot about leadership. We talk a lot about culture and plans and vision and all that. And it's so important. And I never talk about discipline. It just came up during this conversation here. I wonder if we need to talk about that more when we talk about these things. Maybe not. I don't know. But nothing happens without action. I know that. And you got to be disciplined to take action, and maybe consistent action.
It's funny you say that, because my mom will tell me, pardon me, one of my superhero powers is self-discipline, and that I will set a goal and do the thing, which a lot of people struggle with, especially when it comes to New Year's resolutions. So the ability to be resilient is what you need to develop if you fall off those rails. So Nick talked about the bumper pads, and one of the activities that we have in the book is to think about legacy. And we have folks write their retirement speech. So imagine you're writing your retirement speech and you're looking back on your career. How would you define it to be? If you picture that now, if you can clearly define a future for yourself, that helps to strengthen those bumper pads, so that maybe it can help you get back on the rails and narrow in when those mistakes come. But for sure, everyone makes mistakes and loses that discipline. So it's, how do you adapt to the change and become resilient?
Yeah.
And those things happen.
And it's kind of a mindset. And we actually have a whole chapter in our book about adaptability and resilience. It's something that you have to truly embrace, right? And part of it is, trying new things, and experiencing failure, and it's a learned behavior, right? There's some people in this world that are so intolerant to risk that they don't ever really understand and learn how to adapt to things when they don't go the way they should go, right? And there's the story, that you hear all the time, and it's something that I used to tell my son, right? When they get home from school, in elementary school or middle school or even high school, what did you do today that you failed at, right? Yeah. Just to try to get them to learn, okay, I tried something, it didn't work out the way I needed it was supposed to, or how I thought it was. Okay, what are we going to do about it now, right? And to us, that is a learned skill, just like leadership is a learned skill. People are not, contrary to the saying, people are not natural born leaders.
Right.
It is a learned skill. And I think a critical element to that is, as you were saying, Shawn, the discipline, and what we reference really is adaptability and resilience.
Yeah, love it. When you guys go through the things that you've gone through with acquisition, and this company was bought out, I've experienced some of that too with some things that we're doing. We had somebody approach us to buy us out not too long ago, and we just separated from another company like in October of last year. So there's all these things happen, mergers and things like that. What is it that made you realize that it's time to part ways with that, which I would submit is big change and risk, right?
Yeah.
To your point, Nick, what is it that makes you do that? I mean, it's not always easy understanding what the right answer is. And I don't know that there's always a right answer either, because when we choose one, we'll never know what the other one could have led us to.
100%. I think from our perspective is we were, and Marnie mentioned this earlier, we were frustrated that the fourth acquiring company was, all dead set on their core values of raving fans. And Marnie and I were responsible for customer service, her through customer success and me through customer support. And they were significantly restricting our budget and our resources. And there was this huge clash between what our core value was, what the stated core value of the company was, and what actually was happening.
Yeah.
And then, it was a risk. I mean, from our perspective, to leave a company that we've had a lot of success with, that we were leaders in that organization, was a huge risk. But it goes back to what we were talking about again earlier, which is we believed in ourselves first, we believed in our framework, and we felt like regardless of how it ended up working, although we were dead set on manifesting success, we would learn from the experience one way or another. And that is a big core value from our perspective, is just continuous learning.
Yeah. Okay. So when we talk about core values, and I'm wondering, and you, Marnie, when you talked about writing your retirement speech, it's sort of reverse engineering to get that vision.
Yeah.
In business, I talk a lot about purgatories.
Hmm.
And that's something my buddy Dan Plata and partner actually has a presentation on, these purgatories that you reach at certain revenue levels or employee levels where, okay, people get stuck, businesses get stuck, break through that, and then you got another one, right? I'm wondering, and so with business, I talk about, you can have your core values, your mission statement and vision, and maybe not so much core values. Let me put that on the shelf a little bit. But your mission can certainly change as your business grows. So, and as you age, I certainly don't want the same things as I did when I was 21 years old or 23 years old. So talk to me a little bit about, maybe let's talk about it. Can core values change as you enter different parts of your life? And whether it's all of a sudden we've got children, all of a sudden they're out of the house, all of a sudden this, that, and the other, life happens and we transition into different human beings. I know there's certain fundamental principles that are probably, we can all agree, are good for the most part. Telling the truth is a good thing, okay? Being kind is probably a good thing. Those things. Can core values change for the personal aspect, for that? If you've got core values for your personal life, is it different?
So I think it's interesting. I did a talk with a knitting guild. I owned a knitting shop, as a random aside. And I titled the talk, "How You Do Anything is How You Do Everything." And so I sort of challenged that very notion of, okay, now I took some values, some like productivity, for example, which is relevant to knitting. Honesty is not really relevant to knitting, right? But I talked about, okay, some people like to be productive, like create a product, and other people like the process. And I said, are you like this? And I'm a productivity person. So like, am I always like that? And in fact, I was. Now, I don't always think it is true. But I think some of your core values play out differently depending on your scenario. But as Nick said, continuous learning is one that sticks with us in every role and every place we've been. He and I are both problem solvers. So if you confront us with a flat tire, we're going to go into problem solving mode. A medical issue, we're going to go into problem solving mode. A business problem in problem solving mode. Nick, what say you on that? I don't know that we've talked through this one.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it's okay to have aspirational core values. Like if you want to become more honest, let's say you're not the most honest person in the world, and you believe that that would make you feel better and be yourself. I think you can have an aspirational core value. But I think in general, and I don't know, I'm how old am I, Marnie? 53 years old. Maybe things change, but I've kind of been that same person my whole life, right? I like to problem solve. I like to learn. I like to listen. That for me personally hasn't changed. So
Yeah.
It's been my experience that I kind of am who I am, and I know what drives and motivates me. So yeah.
Okay. I think that those are two really good answers. And I think what you just outlined sort of goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, which is kind of taking a look in the mirror. Let's start there. Let's see who you really are, and write down a couple things that I don't like about myself. And if you're honest, those things, are a lot of times things that you can fix, relatively easily, and then it gets rid of some of those byproducts like shame or guilt or those sort of things that we feel about ourselves that start to free us, right? And it's a really, there's so much that's paradoxical with spirituality and ego and becoming a better person. It's crazy, I want to be free. Well, good. Then you need to do this, this, and this.
Exactly.
Do it. Right. So that's so crazy, but interesting. And you can have a whole other show about just that topic alone. And I think a lot of times it comes down to just a few things that, for me, it always goes back to things like I'm afraid. Fear, right? I'm afraid to lose what I have or not get what I want. I'm afraid because I'm thinking about tomorrow and next week, which is basically fantasy island because it's not even real. And then then when I think of the past, I get in trouble because then I get a little bit regretful because I could have done something better. So I try to talk a lot about being present and being in the now. And about 6 years ago, I really, really, really practiced that. And I really made it something, and I isolated that as like the most important priority that I wanted to change about myself. And it opened up an entirely new, different world and changed my life dramatically. Because I wasn't thinking about business or a golf course when my wife and I were having a conversation. I was actually listening to her or my kids, or my employees or my clients or my vendors or the guy on the street or the lady in the store. It just absolutely changes everything. And it's nothing else changed in the world. It was that me just paying attention and actually listening to people. And it's an amazing thing to just take those tiny little steps and open up a whole new world. It's not hard to open up an entire new world, but to the things both of you said, it's that change. It's that, you've got to fail. You're never going to learn to run unless you fall when you're walking and all that, and I got to a point like a year ago, I talked a lot about this, where things were really just comfortable, man, and cruising along. And I'm going, I got to the point where I'm like, I'm begging for something shitty to happen to me. So I'm like going, all right, come on,
up here.
Yeah, something smacked me around a little bit here. This isn't good, man. I need to fall a little bit. And there were things that happened. But I think a lot of that too was that acceptance thing. Listen, okay, this sucked, but I accept it. I learn from it. I move on from it. And, I've got a saying, I used to say to my kids a lot, shitty things must happen to you in order for you to build character. If you want just roses and lollipops and ice cream, you're never going to be a better human being. That's just the way it is. Culture. Let's get into that. Let's talk a little bit about culture. So, we often talk about business culture, and I talk a lot about that with employee-focused culture. Do you guys talk? You've got this thing where it's like a personal thing, but anything personal leads into business and professional and everything else in your life. Talk a little bit about culture and what that means to you guys, and what in the book or when you talk to people a little bit about culture.
So, if core values are your guiding principles, then culture is how it plays out in your life and at work, right? So it's interesting to watch how that manifests into day-to-day actions. I'm going to let Nick talk because I'm going to cough.
Yeah.
Here, I've got a cough drop right here. Here, no problem.
But yeah, I think the struggle is, and it goes back to, I think, a lot of the things that you were saying, Shawn, right, is when your culture is different than what your guiding principles are, that's when you become anxious, right? That's when you become angry. That's when you become lost and a little bit of stuck. So from our perspective, I think, just doing on a personal level, I think you have to do some self-reflection and really think about what motivates you, what gets you out of bed every day, and then do some self-reflection to see okay, am I actually living the life that my core values and my guiding principles kind of dictate, or am I not? And you know what? If you're not, you're probably wondering why you're anxious, or you have a short temper or something to that effect, because things are just out of whack. I think that scales right up to a business level, right? If our core values are X, Y, and Z, creativity, we love creativity, and we have an organization full of micromanagers. That's the clash, and you're going to have people. You're going to look on Glassdoor, and you can say, okay, why is my rating 2.7?
Right.
It's because the culture is not playing out to what you state drives you, either as an individual or as an organization.
Yep. You guys obviously wrote a book. What just happened in New York City with this book, by the way?
Oh,
What's going on with that? I read a little rumor, heard a little rumor. What is going on with that?
yeah. Well, two things happened in New York City. One, we went and hung outside Good Morning America and found Robin Roberts, who we gave a copy of our book, and she read the subtitle, A Leadership Book for Life, Your Life, and said, oh, I love these type of books. Thank you. First, she was a genuine human that I think is very Ted Lasso-like. But two, we won 2 Book Fest awards on leadership and management and personal development in the business category. And our book was displayed on the NASDAQ, the big one. I would tell people it's going to be there. I'm like, the big one.
That is huge, man. Congratulations, both of you. That's not normal. That's not normal. So very good, man. That's phenomenal. The little tiny URL that's going by the way, is a link that I put together to get to Amazon to buy the book.
Oh,
and so I'll post something else too to make sure that people know how to get your book. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about that we haven't touched on?
No. I mean, we have our next projects in the hopper. Look out for it. It's a masterclass on personal leadership. We hope that we'll have an announcement out there very soon. We're all over social at Like Lasso, if anybody's interested in following us. But beyond that, Shawn, I think I would say we appreciate you and your time, and we've really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. What about, before we wrap it up, what about, so do you do coaching or consulting, or is it, you've got the book? What is the business, and what is it that people can get help from contacting you?
So we're always happy to chat. LinkedIn is the easiest way to find each of us. But we don't have an official consulting or coaching. We do a lot of presentations and chatting with groups. So we certainly can do that type of thing, keynotes, etc. But if you read the back of the book, we have sort of a next project that we are starting to work on. And the masterclass is really where, it is a bite-sized chunk of really taking actionable steps to helping folks look at their own personal leadership and becoming the best version of themselves. So if folks are interested in that, feel free to reach out to us, and we will happily point you in those directions.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm so glad the stars align, and we threw a few bucks at the same place, and we got to match up. I appreciate it. And like I said, everybody out there that's watching or listening, get the book. It's different. It's not your typical stuff that we have on, and I've read it, and it's phenomenal. That's why it was up on the New York Stock Exchange, or the NASDAQ, I'm sorry, in New York City. And I wish you guys the very, very, very best of luck and everything you do. I think you're just, you are making a difference in the world. And I think it's just cool as hell what you got going on. And there's a reason that book has been successful. So I would imagine you're going to be riding the bumpers and making sure you stay on track to what the next step is on the back of that book. And I wish you guys the best with that.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks for having us.
All right,
Shawn,
everybody.
we appreciate it.
You bet. I'll be back next Tuesday at 4 p.m. on whatever day that is. I guess on the 11th or something like that. So let me do one more thing, because I don't have a VA here today, do I?